last thing we're going to talk about in this overall anatomy and mobility section is how to warm up, or in other words, how to prepare for the movement. Now, I know this could easily fit into the training section, but I think it's important because as you start to learn about your body, the whole purpose of a warm-up is to prepare your body for what you are about to do. Now, the warm-up should consist of three main parts. An activation part, which is generally engaging all the ranges and planes of motion. And so there are three main planes of motion. You've got your transverse, which is a rotation. You've got your sagittal, which is flexion, extension. So think about if you split your body here and you are folding and you're bending. So this is a lot of running and squatting and deadlifting. And then you've got your frontal, so that's sideways, so any lateral movement. So your activation portion should be some form of movement that get every part of this. This could be something like a lunge and a twist. This could be something like a lateral lunge. This could be something like a straight leg kick. And it could be something like a standing roll down where you are rolling and creating extension and flexion in the spine and the hips. It doesn't really matter because you want to have something that works on every single joint. Ideally, compound exercises are going to cross more things off than simple single exercises. But the overall point of the activation is that you are working on something to activate each part. Then we want to get to the groundwork. And so this is important because certain stresses we get when we're looking straight down with gravity going down help engage some muscles, but not others. So the glutes and the posterior chain can be harder to engage if we're standing up all the time. So taking time when you lay on your back, you do some hip bridges, you do some hip flexor work, you do some spine extension, some core engagement, some glute extension and flexion. Those are very valuable. So doing some form of groundwork is going to be really important. And then you want your dynamic portion. Now, this is where you're going to start to create your warm-up and your movement prep in a way that looks like what you are about to do in terms of a training session. So if you see any of the warm-ups I do, and they will be unlocked in this section for you as well, if you're about to go and run, the dynamic portion should look like A-skips, patterning for that. Skips for height, bounding. It should look like high knees, butt kicks, something that's getting your heart rate, your blood pumping, and overall, you're training the movement you're about to do. If it's a bunch of agility, it should be change of direction. It should be lateral. It should be rotation. It should be in this transverse and frontal plane where I'm pushing and I'm rotating. It should be quick changes of direction. And if you're doing a lot of plyometrics, so jumping, you want to think about quick extension of the hips, flexion of the hips, quick movement, starting to get the feet ready to balance and to hit the ground and make contact. That's very valuable. Now, if you're doing none of those and you're about to go lift, the dynamic portion is going to be a little bit different. You may not be as cardiovascularly taxing because you may not need to get the heart rate up. You still need to get to a point where you're borderline sweating. That's really, really important. It's the whole point of the warm-up. This is where you're warming your body up. You're increasing your physiological temperature to prepare your body, because when you do that, blood flow goes to your muscles, it flows more easily, you get better lubrication through your joints. Everything is flowing better when things get warm. If you're about to lift, let's say you're about to squat, then guess what? Your dynamic portion should look like what you're about to do. Yeah, that means your dynamic portion will include squats, maybe some barbell, maybe cleans or snatches if you're doing Olympic lifting. It doesn't matter exactly what the reps and the schemes are, but you need to prepare for what you're about to do in the dynamic portion, right? So there's three portions. Activation is where you have general, multiple range of motion, something for every joint in the body to get through a full range of motion in multiple planes of motion. Your groundwork is where you start to get your core, your posterior chain activated, and then your dynamic portion, which is what's going to prepare your body, your temperature, your physiological state, the sympathetic nervous system where you're getting ready for fight or flight. That happens in the dynamic, okay? Now, I want you to take all the stuff we talked about in the body and how it works together as a unit and pair that with your understanding of what you're about to do from a training perspective to create your overall mobility, your movement prep. Now, the last thing we're talking about is what you should do if you have a specific limitation or injury or problem, right? So the warm-up is a great place where you address things generally. But if you have something like, let's say you have a wrist injury, you want to include a movement and mobilization for that, but you may not tax it. So if, let's say I've got a broken wrist and I can't go to full extension yet, I may not be able to do bird dogs or fire hydrants. That's okay. I can do another movement to engage those, but I still want to think about getting some of that motion gently back into this wrist. The thing you want to remember is that you will really focus on the mobilizations and improving mobility deficits at the cool down. That's afterwards. So if you have limited shoulder range of motion or tight hips at the end, that's when you're really going to spend 5 to 10 minutes working on that because your body is ready and you want to make sure that you are sealing that down. You need to spend time on both ends, the warm up and the cool down, but the lion's share of that will happen after the training so that you're continuing to work on that. Because in order to really make some mobility changes, you're gonna have to spend some time, let's say whether you're stretching, rolling, and self-myofascial release, or overall doing some mobilization activation stuff that may otherwise detract from the position, say you're about to be in from a training perspective, okay? So beforehand, overall system, body's getting ready, you're paying some attention to deficits you have. You may think about adding in some more movement, so if I have stiffer or tight shoulders or stiffer hips, it may be beneficial to add in 1 or 2 more movements for that area, but the lion's share comes afterwards in the cool down. Now, what is the cool down? That's exactly what it sounds like. You are taking time to slow down, to breathe, to let your heart rate come back down, and you're gonna switch in this parasympathetic tone. Training is when you beat your body up. Your goal is to switch from training to rest and digest, this kind of relaxed state, as quickly as possible. Because the quicker you can get to a rest and recovery state, the quicker your body recovers. The quicker you're able to get back in and get ready to train again. That is your top priority. So if you're not training, cool down. But that doesn't mean you can skip it, because jumping from a jacked up sympathetic state to running away and doing something will prolong the state, and you're not gonna actually switch into recovery mode quickly. Your goal is to say, I'm gonna take a few minutes, it can be 3 to 5 minutes, it can be breathing, it could be foam rolling, it could be stretching, it could be mobilization, it could be just simply hanging out. It doesn't really matter, but taking time to calm down is really, really valuable. Now, you're gonna get a lot of benefit if you actually do spend some time working on mobilizations and improving your mobility and movement, but it doesn't have to happen every time. You can stretch if you want to. It's just as effective as scratching a bug bite. I don't care, but if you like to do it, then by all means go for it. Whatever you need to do to get yourself to sit down, take a few minutes to calm down before you run out the door, that's gonna be incredibly, incredibly effective, because that sets the stage for the next part, which is just as important as training, which is the recovery. So make your movement prep, your warm up, and your cool down an absolute non-negotiable portion of your training, and your body will stay healthy and injury free. I promise you, that is a huge, huge part of it. And you can now check out all the different parts, the movement, the prep, the warm-ups, the cool downs, everything I put together in this series. They're all there for you to come back and reference moving forward, all right? Thanks for working this. We're gonna switch over to phase 3 next, which is we're gonna talk about everything related to training, improving your skills and your specific abilities in phase 3. Can't wait to see you there. Let's get to it.